Hello. Day 4. Day 4. Day 4 of Jesus. All about Jesus. 100% about Jesus. We are going there. We are talking all about Jesus. I know it takes you guys just a second to log on. I hope everyone is doing well today. Man, it's like, can you guys believe it's November? It's kind of ridiculous that it's November. We were just discussing our Thanksgiving Day plans and oh my gosh, it's like November. I promise you it was just like 2 seconds ago, March. Like what in the world happened? I don't even know what happened. Let me say hello as people begin to get the notification that we are going there with Jesus today. Christine, how are you from Montana? Oh, I love Montanians. I've met a lot of Montanians. Let's see. Regina, hello. Tammy, hello. Lizette, hello. Colleen, you guys, how are you guys? Tina, hello, hello, hello. Heather, hello, Heather. Shauna, hi, Shauna, how are you, my dear? Amanda, Ashley, how are you guys? You guys doing okay? Okay, everyone okay? We all making it? Hello, Cheryl. Oh my goodness. Okay, love you guys so much. Kathy, I can't read your last name, but it ends with a ski. Erica, Peggy, how are you guys? Okay, I hope you guys are doing well. We have sort of entered into this new season. I don't know if you guys are like OGs and you've been listening for a while, years, maybe not. I started off doing selfie videos like one a week for years, and then live became a feature on Facebook. And so this year, especially when all the churches were like closing down and everything was crazy, this year it really seemed to people just really desperately wanted the word. And so we started doing these Bible studies throughout the year, this year specifically. And it has been amazing what God has done through all of that. I'm so incredibly excited just to see how you guys are responding and what you guys are doing and all that kind of stuff. But today I wanted to talk to you guys about one of my most favorite parts of scripture. It is one of my most absolute favorite parts about Jesus. And I actually wrote this entire chapter about this in Gangster Prayer. I wrote the whole thing. You can go pick up my latest book, Gangster Prayer, and you can buy it wherever, Amazon, wherever you want to buy it. But it talks all about Jesus, and it talks about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And one of the things I was so drawn as I was writing an entire book on prayer, I knew this was like one of the very first ideas for the entire book. I knew I wanted to include the Gethsemane prayer in my book. And it was actually one of the first chapters that I even wrote. So I personally don't write the chapters in order. But it was one of the first chapters that I wrote, and I was so incredibly drawn to the Gethsemane prayer, and I studied it for a really long time. It actually took me a month, maybe even a little bit longer, to write that chapter in my book, because I wanted to completely dissect the Gethsemane prayer. And one of the things that I realized, and I'm about to read it to you, is how incredibly, and this is what we're going to talk about today, relatable Jesus is in this Gethsemane prayer. When we see Jesus, let me do a little backup for you. I think so many times, one of the most giant misconceptions about Jesus is that he cannot relate to what we go through on a regular basis. He can't relate. He maybe doesn't understand. Maybe you have an incredibly pressing, horrific, hard season that you're going through, and you don't understand why God isn't intervening, and you don't understand why God hasn't answered your prayer. Jesus knows exactly where you are. He knows exactly where you sit. He knows exactly how you feel. He knows exactly what you're going through. And we see his human side in the prayer in Gethsemane. Now, the word Gethsemane means oil press, okay? So Gethsemane means oil press. And it's interesting that in Gethsemane, in my study, I found out that there's about eight olive trees that are still present in Gethsemane, in the Garden of Gethsemane, because it's still around today. You can actually go visit it. That they are saying are ancestors of the trees that Jesus actually bent down in front of that day and prayed his Gethsemane prayer. It's fascinating if you go through the work to see how you get olive oil. It's absolutely fascinating. I don't even have time to go in all of this. But I want to talk to you about how relatable Jesus is today. Don't discount the fact in your life and tell yourself that Jesus doesn't understand the depth of ache and frustration and betrayal and denial and hurt and pain that you have in your life. That would be a vast lie from the enemy. Jesus understands the depth of the hurt and pain that maybe you're experiencing now. Maybe you are in a Gethsemane season right now where you are being tried like nobody's business. But maybe you've been through a Gethsemane season in your life that you've not healed from. And you've almost locked Jesus out of it because he didn't come through the way you wanted him to come through. He didn't listen the way you wanted him to listen. I want to tell you right now, right here in front of you, that Jesus understands when the deepest of pain in your life. And he understands it because he lived it. I want to read the Gethsemane prayer to you, and hang with me because I know this is for somebody special to you today. In Matthew 26, verse 36, this is what it says. Keep in mind, they had just had the Last Supper. They had just done the whole thing. Judas was off to go get his little 30 pieces of silver or whatever it was, and he was coming back, okay? Everyone's there. Everyone's there. All the disciples are there except for Judas, okay? Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and distressed. This is important to listen to what is happening to Jesus. He began to get grieved and distressed. A lot of times we just skip over that part. He began to get grieved and distressed. Then he said to them, listen to what he says. "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch." And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." And he came to his disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "So You men cannot keep watch with me for an hour. Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he went away a second time and prayed, saying, Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done. I want to stay here for a second just because I want you to understand that Jesus understands the depth of what you are facing when you face it. He understands how deep some pains go. He understands how trying some seasons are. He understands situations come up and it literally grieves you to a point where you can't even verbalize it with words. He understands why. Because he walked through the Garden of Gethsemane. And what does it say? I was so fascinated by this, and I studied this for a very long time so that I would get it right. He said to them, Peter, James, and John, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here, watch and pray. And he went a little beyond them, and he fell on his face, and he prayed. When I read that, I guess when I read this several years ago, it was like I had read it. It was like I was reading it for the first time. His soul was deeply grieved to the point of death. I actually put it in the book, and they opted not to use this terminology, but it looked to me like Jesus, although he was fully God and fully man, was having a breakdown. His soul was deeply grieved to the point of death. If in biblical language, that is a severe state of mind. His soul was so traumatized because of what he was facing, what he found himself in, that he verbally said to Peter, James, and John, my soul is so grieved. I am at the point of death. I am so completely overwhelmed. And he stopped talking to them, and he told them to pray, and he went a little far beyond, and then he fell on his face in prayer. I am moved so deeply by this, because when I go through things in my life that are so hard, that seem to try every piece of me, that seem to try my patience, and just try me in every aspect. After I saw the depth of the pressure that was on Jesus Christ, I totally understood that Jesus not only understands what I go through, no matter how hard it is, he understands much greater than I'll ever face. We have taken Jesus as just this guy that sits up in heaven, that we've watered down the truth of who Jesus actually is. He's not just some guy that is detached from our life that we can't relate to. This is when we see his humanity on full display, and this should encourage us greatly that he understands exactly how and what we go through, no matter how hard it is. He is relatable in this moment. The human side on full display in this moment. And he goes and he falls down and he starts praying, and then he starts asking God, please take this from me. This is too much. If there's another way, I want the other way. This is too much. I can't do this. Well, he doesn't say he can't do this. I'm sorry. Strike that from the record. But he does tell the Lord, this is too much. It is too much. I am overwhelmed. If there's another way, give me another way. If there's anything else that I can do in order to achieve the same result, give me something else, anything else. But how does he end this prayer? Not my will, but thine be done. You guys know and have seen pictures of my baby Haven. She's 5. And she is like the light of my world. I love her with every ounce of my being. She is everything and more I ever dreamed of. She is so sassy. That girl is so sassy. She's so strong. She's tiny. She weighs 42 pounds, you guys, and she's 5 years old. She has weighed the same for 2 years. And we feed her all the time. She's got one of those metabolisms that's like out of control. She's 42 pounds, so slender, thin, beautiful, but she is so strong on the inside. And a lot of you, if you know this, if you don't, it's everywhere. I talk about it all the time. But we adopted Haven, and she was born April 25th, 2015. And when I pulled up into the hospital, she had already been born at that point. She was born in Mississippi. She had already been born at that point. She was an emergency C-section baby. And so Eddie and we didn't know that the emergency was happening. And so we got in our car from Dallas and drove over to Mississippi in order to get here, in order to get there after she was born. But I remember as I was pulling into the hospital, the Lord told me this: there's something wrong with her. This is written in my book. It's chronicled in Gangster Prayer. It goes into great detail about it. There's something wrong with her. Will you still take her? I'm being transparent with you today. When I pulled into the hospital and I saw my little baby in that, I don't even know what it is. It's like a clear bassinet that they put the babies in whenever they're born. I looked at her and she looked 100% perfect to me. And I said, Lord, I don't see anything wrong with her. She looks perfect to me. She's perfect. She's beautiful. She's so cute. She's everything I dreamed of. And the Lord said, there's something wrong with her. And Eddie and I took her from the hospital and signed the papers and did the whole thing. And we took her back to our hotel. And long story short, we noticed that she was getting really choked. She couldn't breathe. It would everything would lock up in her throat when we would give her a bottle, and we were very concerned about her. And at that point, we hadn't been able to come back to Dallas. So we're very, very nervous about this. She's our 4th baby. So, I'm a professional mom over here, but something about it wasn't right. And eventually she stopped breathing, and we rushed her to the hospital and called 911. And we found out that Haven had a severe birth defect. The pediatric ENT told us that she was having what's called death spells. And she followed up this diagnosis with this severe birth defect in her throat with death spells with this: we don't recommend surgery because it's so dangerous. She's going to have to grow out of it. It could take 9 months. I went home after that doctor's appointment, and my husband and I, it was about an hour from our house. We didn't talk the whole time. I didn't know what to do. The doctor had told us, you need to watch her. You need to watch her very closely, because at any moment, if you don't catch one of these death spells, she could be gone. And I remember not knowing what to think, but knowing that God was in control. And we, of course, brought her home. And that night, as we got home, she had another spell. And I went and got her, and I might get emotional just because I love her so much. I went and got her from the other room, and she was in her little bassinet, little shaky thing that the babies have. And I brought her over to my chest and on my bedroom. I made everyone leave my bedroom because it was just me and her. And she was struggling so badly to breathe. We'd been to the hospital. We've got all the medicine. We've got all this stuff, but she still had the severe birth defect. And I remember her laying on my chest. She was so tiny, probably, 7 pounds at that point, laying on my chest. And I began to sing to her. Somewhere in my soul, This child that I had waited for at that point, 16 years. I had dreamed about adopting a child. I had dreamed of exactly what she looked like, is exactly what God placed in my heart. But somewhere that night, as I laid with her on my chest, I started singing, and I felt her entire body relax. It was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. I realized she was just as terrified as I was. And I started singing, and I ended up singing over her for a couple of hours. You know, moms, what you do for your kids, you don't leave them if they're hurting. You are there. And somewhere in the midst of my crying, singing, and praying, I was able, listen, I wasn't at a baby dedication service. I wasn't at, a church service where we all got dolled up and dressed up. But somewhere in my soul that night, I remember telling the Lord, you gave her to me for a couple of weeks, but she is 100% yours. I don't have the power to save her, but I do have the power to surrender her to you. Not my will, Lord, but your will be done. And now listen, it's one of the hardest prayers I've ever prayed, but that was a Gethsemane moment for me. I held my tiny little perfect child and surrendered her over because I knew that what God wanted to do with her was so much greater than the plans I had for her. And that's where Jesus related and understood exactly what I was feeling, what I was sensing. He understood the depth of my ache, the depth of my fear, the depth of my frustration. He understood the depth of me desperately wanting to do something, but not having any control over it. He understood, and his grace met me right there that night. That for me was a Gethsemane prayer. Not my will. And I got a strong will. Not my will, but your will be done. You love her more than I do. You created her, and if you only created her for weeks for me to be your mom, I will submit to your glory. It's amazing, before I move in to the last part of what I want to say, that she still struggled for 6 months. And Eddie and I watched her like a hawk. I mean, we were like that girl was not getting out of my sight. We didn't sleep. How could you? How could you? We gave her every medicine that we could. And one day we went to church. We went to my parents' church in Indiana, and there was an elder from the church that said, he saw that we were there. They knew what the problem was. And he said, I just want the whole church. Can the whole church pray for Haven? We all went forward. I was a sobbing mess. So many people came forward. They laid hands on Haven and prayed for her. And she just happened to have a doctor's appointment that week to check her progress, because we were hoping that she was going to grow out of this birth defect that she had. And after everyone prayed for her, that day she was 100% different. God healed her, completely asymptomatic. The next week, I thought she was completely healed. I thought that the birth defect was completely gone, but we actually went to the doctor and they did a scope to see her progress and how much she had, how she was progressing. And the doctor said, no, she still has a severe birth defect. You should expect more death spells. But since we prayed that day when she was 6 months old, she has never had another death spell. God's will and his miraculous power met us. And even today, I'll tell you on a personal note, she still has the birth defect. She's 5, she still has it. But not one sign of it. Let me tell you something. No matter what it is you are going through, Jesus knows the very depths of it. He knows the height of it. He knows the weight of it. He understands the effects of it. And when you pray a prayer like Jesus did, not my will, but your will be done, you can bet that his will is so calculated and perfect that you can trust it. And I don't know whatever it is that you may be facing today, maybe what you're feeling, what you're going through. I want you to understand that Jesus can relate. And your job is to do what I did with Haven, is to lay that thing down and say, this is going to be the hardest prayer I've ever prayed in my life. But you care about this more than I do. So I'm going to submit my will to your goodness. And I'm going to watch you work. He is so relatable. And when I read this in the scripture, we can't relate to everything. I mean, he was God. But we can relate with his human side. I hope those of you that are struggling today with something and that you have concealed it. You know, I almost feel like maybe you've got barriers up. You don't want Jesus to come in because how could he understand? He couldn't. He's never been where you've been. You're right. He hasn't been where you've been. He's been in circumstances that were 1,000,000 times worse than where you are and where you've been. He can't just relate. He knows even deeper. So whatever it is that you're going through, struggling with, whatever it is today, I want you to take that thing to the Lord and I want you to offer it up and say, you know what? I surrender. Not my will, but your will be done. And there is such a freedom. I remember saying that night, and I was like saying it through tears, because the truth is I didn't want God to have his will. I wanted me to have my will. I wanted her to be healed instantly. That's what I wanted to do. But you know what? Gethsemane prayers, and I wrote this in the book, they press the us out of us. And they put us in position that we can sit back and we can expect God to move on our behalf. When we are weak, he is strong. So I hope this encourages you guys today. I love you so much. I hope you're enjoying this study. I know I didn't know what to do with this study after Tuesday, but I hope you're enjoying it. I will be right back here tomorrow with day 5 of All About Jesus. I love you guys. I love you guys.